Hi, my name is Caleb Simmons, and the story I'm about to share with you is one I never thought I'd be telling. It's about a moment that completely changed my life. A moment where everything I thought I knew about myself, about love, and about eternity was turned upside down. This happened on October 18th, a day that started like any other but ended with me staring eternity in the face. Let me start by giving you a little background about who I was before that day. I lived in a small town just outside of Portland, Maine. My life, at least on the surface, was the kind of life people dream about. I worked as a freelance graphic designer, a job that allowed me to pursue my passion for art while enjoying the flexibility of working from home. I lived in a beautiful 2-story house overlooking Casco Bay, where the sunsets were so breathtaking that they felt like paintings coming to life. My evenings often ended with me curled up on the couch, sipping tea, and watching the waves roll in. I was in a long-term relationship with my partner, Brian. We'd been together for 3 years, and we were happy, or so I thought. We were planning a weekend getaway to Bar Harbor that fall, something we'd been looking forward to for weeks. I had everything I thought I wanted: a stable career, a loving partner, and a comfortable life. But if I'm honest, there was always this underlying emptiness, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I brushed it off, telling myself that everyone felt this way at times. I figured I just needed to work harder, take a vacation, or maybe even adopt a dog to fill the void. Growing up, I'd been raised in a Christian home. My family attended church every Sunday without fail, and I can still remember the hymns we used to sing. But as I got older, I started to drift away from religion. I told myself it was outdated, that I didn't need a set of rules to live a good life. I believed in God, at least I thought I did, but I figured that as long as I was kind to others and true to myself, that was all that mattered. I had convinced myself that God, if he was even paying attention, would accept me just as I was. Looking back now, I can see how blind I was. How much I had deceived myself into thinking that living for my own happiness was enough. But it wasn't until that day in October, when my life quite literally hung in the balance, that I began to understand the truth. October 18th started out like any other day. I woke up early, brewed my usual cup of caramel hazelnut coffee, and settled into my favorite chair by the window. The air outside was crisp, the kind of autumn morning where you can see your breath and the leaves crunch under your feet. The trees lining the street were ablaze with reds and oranges, and everything about the day felt peaceful. I had a client meeting scheduled for later that morning, so I packed up my laptop and headed out the door. As I drove down the coastal highway, the sun was just beginning to rise over the water, casting a golden glow across the waves. I remember thinking how lucky I was to live in such a beautiful place. It felt like one of those moments where everything in the world seemed to align perfectly. As I drove, I called Brian to finalize our plans for the weekend. We were planning to spend a couple of days in Bar Harbor, hiking and enjoying the fall colors. I told him how excited I was, how much I was looking forward to getting away from work and just relaxing. We laughed about how long it had been since we'd taken a real vacation, and I remember feeling this deep sense of gratitude for him and for the life we were building together. Everything felt so normal, so routine. But in an instant, all of that changed. As I rounded a bend in the road, a massive deer appeared out of nowhere. Maine is known for its wildlife, but nothing prepares you for seeing a creature that size standing right in your path. Instinctively, I yanked the steering wheel to avoid hitting it. My tires screeched as the car veered off the road, and suddenly, I felt the world flip upside down. My car tumbled down a steep embankment, rolling over several times before slamming into a cluster of trees. The sound of crunching metal and shattering glass was deafening, and when everything finally stopped, there was nothing but silence. When the car finally came to a stop, I was pinned between the seat and the crumpled metal of the driver's side door. Pain shot through my chest with every shallow breath, and I could feel warm blood trickling down my face. I tried to move, but it was useless. I was trapped. My chest felt like it was on fire, and my vision blurred as waves of dizziness washed over me. At some point, I must have blacked out. When I came to, I could hear faint voices and the sound of footsteps crunching on leaves. Later, I would learn that a passing motorist had spotted the skid marks on the road and called for help. The emergency responders worked tirelessly to reach me, but the steep terrain made it nearly impossible to extract me from the wreckage. It took over an hour to cut me out of the car. By the time they airlifted me to Portland Regional Hospital, my body had given up. I flatlined twice, once in the helicopter and again on the operating table. For a total of 7 minutes, I was clinically dead. And during those 7 minutes, I experienced something that would change me forever. The moment my heart stopped, everything changed. 1 second, I was in the helicopter, surrounded by chaos and pain. The next, I was somewhere completely different. It wasn't like falling asleep or drifting off, it was immediate, like stepping into another world. Suddenly, I was floating above the helicopter. I could see the paramedics working frantically on my body, their faces tense with concentration. I watched as they called out instructions, their voices urgent but distant, as if I were hearing them through a thick fog. But what struck me the most was how calm I felt. There was no fear, no panic, just a strange sense of peace. And then I was pulled away. It felt like an invisible force had grabbed hold of me and was drawing me into another realm. I found myself moving through what I can only describe as a tunnel, though it wasn't the peaceful, light-filled tunnel you often hear about. This one was chaotic, swirling with colors and sounds that defied explanation. It was overwhelming, almost suffocating, but I couldn't stop moving forward. As I moved through the tunnel, I began to relive my life. Every memory, every choice, every moment was laid bare before me, not as a series of disconnected events, but all at once. It was as if I could see the ripple effects of my actions, how every decision I'd made had shaped not only my life, but the lives of those around me. Then, everything stopped. I found myself in a vast, indescribable space. It wasn't dark, but it wasn't light either. It simply was. And in that space, I wasn't alone. The first few days after I woke up in the hospital were the hardest of my life. My body was broken, my mind was overwhelmed, and my spirit felt like it was caught between two worlds. I had just experienced something so profound, something so life-changing, but I didn't know how to explain it to anyone. The doctors told me I was lucky to be alive. They listed my injuries: 4 broken ribs, a punctured lung, internal bleeding, and a concussion, and said it was a miracle I'd survived it all. But as I lay there in that hospital bed, all I could think about was what I'd seen and heard during those 7 minutes I was gone. I wanted to talk about it, to share what had happened, but I didn't know where to start. Who would believe me? Even I had trouble wrapping my head around it. The memories were so vivid, so real. Yet they felt like they belonged to another realm entirely. Brian was there when I woke up, holding my hand. His eyes were filled with relief and love, but also worry. He kept asking me what had happened, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him right away. How could I? How could I explain that everything we'd built together, everything we'd planned for, no longer felt like it aligned with the truth I now knew? Eventually, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I told him everything. The accident, the tunnel, meeting Jesus, and the truths that were revealed to me. I told him about the love I felt in Jesus' presence and the weight of realizing how far I'd strayed from God's plan for my life. Brian listened quietly, but I could see the pain in his eyes. He didn't understand. He thought the trauma had made me hallucinate, or that my injuries had affected my brain. "Caleb," he said, his voice trembling, "this isn't you. You've been through so much. Let's just focus on getting you better, okay?" But I couldn't just move on. I couldn't pretend that what I'd seen hadn't happened. I told him that I loved him, but I also told him that I couldn't continue living the way I had before. It was the hardest conversation I've ever had, and it broke both of our hearts. Saying goodbye to someone you love is never easy, but I knew it was the right thing to do. After I was discharged from the hospital, I began the slow process of rebuilding my life, not just physically, but spiritually. I found a local church and started attending services regularly. At first, I felt out of place, like I didn't belong. I was afraid of being judged for my past, but to my surprise, the people there welcomed me with open arms. They didn't see me as someone who needed to be fixed. They saw me as someone who needed love, support, and truth. But the journey wasn't easy. The same-sex attractions I'd felt for most of my life didn't just disappear overnight. There were days when I questioned whether I could do this, whether I could really live the life God was calling me to. I'd spent so many years convincing myself that my identity was tied to my sexuality, and letting go of that felt like losing a part of myself. I began meeting with a counselor at the church who specialized in helping people navigate these kinds of struggles. She didn't judge me or try to force change. Instead, she helped me understand that my worth wasn't defined by my desires or my past. It was defined by who I was in Christ. That realization was liberating. When I started sharing my story, I knew there would be backlash. But nothing could have prepared me for the intensity of it. Former friends called me a traitor, accusing me of turning my back on the LGBTQ+ community. Social media was flooded with hateful messages, with people calling me brainwashed, delusional, or worse. There were moments when the criticism felt overwhelming. I'd read comments from people who used to support me, and their words would cut deep. But every time I felt like giving up, I'd think back to what Jesus showed me. The people trapped in that holding place. The souls longing for truth but unable to find it. I knew I couldn't stay silent. As the months went by, I started to find my footing. I began leading a support group at my church for people who were questioning their faith or struggling with their identity. It wasn't about forcing anyone to change. It was about creating a safe space for people to explore the truth and find healing. The group started small with just a handful of people, but word began to spread, and before long, more and more people started showing up. Each week, I heard stories of heartbreak, confusion, and longing. Some of them were just like me, people who had drifted away from their faith and were searching for something more. Others were skeptics who weren't sure what to believe. But no matter where they were on their journey, they all shared one thing in common: a desire to find peace. One of the most profound lessons I've learned through all of this is what true love really means. For so many years, I thought love was about accepting people exactly as they were, without challenging their choices. But now I see that real love goes deeper than that. Real love is about wanting the best for someone, not just in this life, but in eternity. When I think about the people I used to encourage to follow their own truth, my heart aches. I thought I was helping them, but I was actually leading them further away from the one thing that could truly save them. That realization has humbled me in ways I can't even begin to describe. Over time, I've started to see the ripple effects of my story. People from all over the country have reached out to me, sharing how my testimony has inspired them to take a closer look at their own lives. Some have told me they've found their way back to God after years of feeling lost. Others have shared that they've started questioning the beliefs they once held onto so tightly. There's one story that stands out to me in particular. A young woman named Sarah came to one of my support group meetings. She was in a similar place to where I had been, wrestling with her identity and feeling torn between her desires and her faith. Over time, I watched her transform. She started seeking God with her whole heart, and the peace that came over her was undeniable. Seeing her joy reminded me why I continue to share my story, even when it's hard. Looking back, I can't help but marvel at how far I've come. The accident that nearly killed me ended up giving me a new lease on life. Not just physically, but spiritually. It opened my eyes to truths I had ignored for far too long and gave me a purpose I never could have imagined. I've lost a lot. Relationships, friendships, and the life I once thought I wanted. But what I've gained is so much greater. Peace, joy, and the assurance that I'm walking in God's plan for my life. I know there will still be challenges ahead, but I also know I'm not facing them alone. If my story has touched your heart, I want to encourage you to take a moment to reflect. Are there areas in your life where you've been ignoring the truth? Are you ready to let go of the things holding you back and embrace the love and purpose God has for you? If so, I want you to know that you're not alone. There's a community of people ready to support you and walk alongside you on this journey. Please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear this, and subscribe to this channel for more stories of hope and transformation. Together, we can spread the message of God's love and redemption. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you.